Are you gearing up for your fantasy football championship? Have you made it all the way to week 17 and looking for a boom play, a sleeper or a streamer to help get you past that final game and bring home championship glory? Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, with RotoBaller sleepers, streamers, and boom plays for week 17 of your fantasy football season. And we'll start at the quarterback position. Two players at that position who could be in line for monster games. First up is Derek Carr of the New Orleans Saints going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Derek Carr is averaging 15.2 points per game on the season, last week having one of his better games of the season, finishing with 29 fantasy points. And this week 17 matchup, he goes up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a Tampa Bay defense that allows 284.4 passing yards per game. They allow 23.5 points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and on the season, Tampa Bay has allowed 21 passing touchdowns. Derek Carr's wide receiver room is healthy. Chris Olave getting over the ankle injury. Rashid Shaheed continuing to make plays. Great matchup for the Saints quarterback against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Also at the quarterback position, take a look at Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals against the Philadelphia Eagles. You saw the New York Giants make big plays. Tyrod Taylor to Darius Slayton late in that game last week. And Kyler Murray also should benefit from this Eagles secondary. On the season, Kyler Murray averaging 18.2 fantasy points per game. Last week finishing with just over 20 fantasy points. And we've talked about it all year long. This Eagles secondary can be taken advantage of. Philly allows 267.2 passing yards per game. On the season, they've allowed 24.1 PPR points per game to the quarterback position with 31 passing touchdowns allowed. The only defense that's allowed more, the Washington Commanders. Now, at the running back position, two running backs to be mindful of. Really three, but we'll call it two, but take advantage of the Raiders matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. If Josh Jacobs plays, I utilize Josh Jacobs everywhere. If he's unable to go, I continue to ride Zamir White against the Indianapolis Colts. Zamir White, again, caveat, if Jacobs is out, otherwise pivot to Jacobs. But if Jacobs is out, go Zamir White. Zamir White over the last two games, 17.5 fantasy points in each of those games, with a total of 214 rushing yards over those two games, including the monster performance last week. Those games were against the Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. This week, the Raiders running backs go up against the Indianapolis Colts, which allow 130.7 rushing yards per game. In PPR formats, the Colts allow 27.2 points per game to opposing running backs, with a total of 17 touchdowns allowed to the running back position. 15 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns on the season allowed to opposing running backs. Over the last 3 games, the Colts defense as a whole has allowed 25 points per game. I'm actually hoping, because I have Zamir White, that Josh Jacobs is out, Zamir White is in, and I will utilize Zamir White wherever I can in a flex position type of role. Second running back I like this week is Tai Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings. 2 weeks ago, a monster game. Last week, he was disappointing. This week, he should get back on track against the Green Bay Packer defense. A Packer defense that allows 135.9 rushing yards per game. They've allowed 23 points per game to the running back position in PPR formats, and a total of 14 touchdowns to the running back position. 13 rushing touchdowns and 1 receiving to opposing running backs. Great opportunity for Tai Chandler against the Packers' run defense. At the wide receiver position, 2 wide receivers I like as potential boom plays this week. Adam Thielen against the Jacksonville Jaguars, getting him in my lineup. Terrific wide receiver, 3 option, flex option this week with a ton of upside against the Jaguars secondary. On the season, Thielen has been super consistent, averaging 15.1 points per game in a PPR format. Last week, 15.4 fantasy points, 8 targets, 6 catches, 94 yards. Against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week, remember, Jaguars allowed 271.7 passing yards per game. They're really not playing well at all lately, are the Jacksonville Jaguars. They allow 37.5 points per game to opposing wide receivers in a PPR format. And of the 25 passing touchdowns the Jacksonville Jaguars have allowed, 17 of those touchdowns to opposing wide receivers. Great spot for Adam Thielen. Let's get him in lineups this week against the Jaguars. I also like Brandon Cooks in the Saturday night matchup against the Detroit Lions. Cooks is up to 6 touchdowns now on the season, 4 of them at home in Dallas, and that's where this week's game is played. Cooks averaging 10.2 points per game on the season in the PPR format. Had a touchdown last week. Going against Detroit team, listen, Detroit very good against the run, only allowing about 90 rushing yards per game, but you can throw on the Detroit Lions, allowing 254.7 passing yards per game, 37.5 points per game to opposing wide receivers in PPR formats. CeeDee Lamb will obviously get his. Brandon Cooks playing that second role should be in line for a nice matchup. Detroit Lions have allowed 24 passing touchdowns on the season. Of those 24, 18 of them to opposing wide receivers. Like I mentioned, Cooks already has 6 touchdowns on the season. And finally, my boom play at the tight end position this week, Gerald Everett of the Los Angeles Chargers going up against the Denver Broncos. Everett's been consistent but underwhelming all year, averaging about 8 fantasy points per game. Last week, he had just over 11 fantasy points, 7 catches for 42 yards. But he goes against the Denver Bronco defense that is dead last in defending opposing tight ends. On the season, they've allowed the most fantasy points per game at 16.7 points per game allowed to tight ends in a PPR format, and they have allowed the most touchdowns to opposing tight ends at 10 touchdowns on the season to the position. If you lost TJ Hawkinson, something like that, Gerald Everett was a terrific waiver ad at the position. He was about 40% rostered coming into the week, and is a terrific stream boom play at the tight end position if you're looking for an advantage there. So we continue to pick on that Broncos defense that's been terrible all year defending the opposing tight end. So to recap, my Week 17 streamers, sleepers, and boom plays: at the quarterback position, Derek Carr and Kyler Murray. At the running back position, the Raiders running backs, Josh Jacobs, Zamir White, Tai Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings. At the wide receiver position, Adam Thielen, Brandon Cooks, and tight end Gerald Everett. Folks, don't forget, head over to RotoBaller.com. Sign up now for any of the premium passes. Just a couple of days left on our terrific 30% off sale on any of the premium packages. Use that promo code HOLIDAY right up until the new year. Give me a follow on Twitter at @Aniano Fantasy. Like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel, and download the RotoBaller app. It's free. Or 6 great sports right there in the palm of your hand, season long, DFS format, whatever it is you're looking for. RotoBaller.com has you covered. As always, everybody, thanks for watching. Good luck in your championship game this week, and we'll see you next time right here on RotoBaller Radio.